First of all, I mean, I really do want to thank you for taking time because I know you are quite busy. And, I was telling one of my colleagues the other day that I was genuinely excited about this. And it's funny because not like we go back, tons and tons of years, but, as a divorce mortgage professional, I meet a lot of people in the divorce world and other professionals, whether it's legal, financial, real estate, coaching, mental health. And I say this lovingly, but I've met enough people where I get perspective and I can tell when I've met a good one, whether it's, in this case, a good human being who happens to be very dedicated to her craft. And I just want to thank you, Rhonda Noordyk, for being here today and taking time out of your busy
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah, thank you. Right. I really appreciate that because I think at the end of the day, right, I have said at some point, right, if I ever get to the point where I don't enjoy what I'm doing or I get burned out to the point, like then it's time to hang it up, right? Because I think at the end of the day, right, this working with women that are going through divorce or people that are going through divorce is not for the faint of heart.
No.
Right? I mean, it's I love it, and I know that you love it, but it's we have to have a level of dedication that I think is um, yeah, potentially different unless if we were in a different field, right? At the end of the day, we are committed to helping people not only just get through the divorce process, but come out of the other side in a better place. Because for you and I, right? I mean, and I suppose the attorneys too, to some extent, we're working with them for a period of time. And we have an opportunity during that period of time to impact them. And, how are we going to leave them better than when we found them?
Yeah.
You know?
No, it's very true. And what I say about the people who I align with, present company included, is, we're not celebrating divorce. We're not
No.
disrespecting the sanctity of marriage, and we're definitely not breaking up marriages to get a paycheck. I mean, divorce is real. It's part of our society. And if divorce is imminent, these parties deserve the most competent and caring treatment that they can get
Yeah.
as they transition through this. I call it a journey. It's kind of a bumpy journey for most, but to get them to the other side, I
Yeah.
won't say unscathed, but I'll say, as good as possible given all the variables that await them. And we've all heard that expression. People don't, care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I really do feel that there's people like us out there that are really genuinely wanting to help.
Yeah.
And the revenue will come as it comes natural, but if you really show up each day fully present, wanting to help another human being and being able to lend your expertise in the process, there's
Yeah.
kind of an intrinsic shot in the arm that just feels amazing. Did
Yeah.
you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because well, coming up here next month, I will have been in business for 10 years. And started before people knew that there were any other professionals besides an attorney that could actually help them through the divorce process, right? And in fact, I had looked all over the country to try to find something. I thought there has to be a franchise or a model or something. There was no model, there was no franchise. The closest thing to what I could find was in Australia. I was looking for a physical location of financial expert that was dedicated to helping people navigate through the divorce. Now, the certified divorce financial analyst credential has been around longer than 10 years, but most people didn't know what it was. And in fact, I really didn't know what it was. I had started just simply saying, listen, I see a need. I see women that are hurting and are frustrated, and there has to be a better way because they're being bullied and steamrolled and, all of the things. And so that's really, how I got started in my business. But to bring it full circle, one of the very first quotes that I found that I was like, listen, this is going to be like the flagship of all that I do. And it resonates with what you were saying, which is a quote by Kristen Armstrong. And as she was going through her divorce from Lance Armstrong, one of the things that she said was, when you're going through a difficult time, You need to surround yourself with the strongest, finest, most positive people you can find. And I thought, yes, yes, and yes to that. Because all of us, whether we've gone through divorce or not, when we've been in those situations where we find ourselves in a vulnerable spot, we need to surround ourselves with those people. And when we did, we're like, man, I can't imagine going through this without those people.
True.
You know?
You mentioned quotes. My favorite quote, and I wish I could take credit for it, but I think it's Ralph Waldo Emerson who gets credit for it, is adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. So you really find out who you are when you're
Yeah.
up against it. And you also find out who the people in your life are in those moments as well. And so to credit, Ms. Armstrong, I mean, that's, you get the right people around you, and, they'll help you through this process for
Yeah.
sure. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of giggling under my breath here because in a mere 10 years, you've done quite a bit. And I just want to read off a couple of things just for the audience to know, because you're very humble. But just imagine, as you're listening to this, folks, in a less than 10 years, Miss Rhonda Noordyk is the founder and CEO of the Women's Financial Wellness Center, also a podcast host of Disrupting Divorce Conversations for Women, a speaker at the Women's Divorce Empowerment. And and just she got kind of bored and decided to write a book called Bold Beginnings. So I mean, just kudos to your accomplishments. You're a mother, you're a wife, I imagine you sleep at some point in the day, I mean, kudos to you for making it all happen.
Well, Jason, thank you. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I think for anybody who is listening that has, a dream of things that they want to do or a vision of what they want to create, it's never easy. I mean, I take myself back, that 10 years when I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave the financial industry and I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to do consulting for women that's independent of financial product sales. And all my male colleagues were like, I don't know, but this train has gone off the tracks. Like, she is nuts, right? Like, we don't know how she's going to make any money because she's not, doing financial planning in a traditional sense. And a couple years into it, I was able to actually purchase an office. And they came to my, ribbon cutting or whatever. And they're like, oh, we always really knew that she was great at business. And I was like, yeah, you guys heckled the crap out of me while I was there.
Right.
So I think at the end of the day, the encouragement is, listen, set the vision. I always said when I left there, hey, I was in the Midwest. I had done my research. I knew there was plenty of divorces in Wisconsin and I wanted to make an impact. And I said, hey, this small town girl is going to, somehow, some way, reach people from coast to coast and maybe even across the world, right? With a message that will resonate with them because I want them to be empowered around the financials. And the divorce space seems like a good platform to be able to do that because everything is tumultuous and it's a good opportunity, right, for transformation, even though there's no shortcuts to it. And so as I started that, and certainly, at the end of the day, there were divorces in Wisconsin that I was able to help, women that I was able to help. But when I launched my podcast was when I was able to reach people all over the country and all over the world. And I just remember thinking, at the time that I started, like, it was lonely. It was, 14, 15-hour days. It was you're the first one in the office and the last one to leave, and you go out to the parking lot like, my car is the only one out here. It's dark. you know. And yet at the same time, right, when we have those things that fuel us, and we get the wins. One of the things I've always said is, listen, yeah, I've been doing this for 10 years. If I was not getting wins for my clients, I would not be doing this work. Like I had to be able to show results, on getting them a better outcome, helping them show up empowered, helping them ask the right questions, helping them understand the process and have a voice, right? So that at the end of this process, as they're looking at that next phase, that next chapter, they're like, hey, I might not know all the answers, but I know more than I did going into it. And I know how to ask really good questions so that I can get answers, right? Whether they decide later on they're going to buy a house or buy a car or, just whatever things that they're going to do as they move forward, we've built that foundation for them to be confident that they can do those things independently. Because a lot of the women that I work with were strong at one point, and they lost that strength as a result of their situation. And now it's time for them to find that again, right? And to be able to walk in that after, long after the divorce is over.
Absolutely. Now, this country is full of thousands of financial professionals out there who have nothing to do with divorce. Was there a certain event or a certain person, a certain client interaction that kind of spawned this path that you're on?
Yeah. Well, like anything, right? There's a series of things. But the biggest catalyst was I was in my office one day, in my executive office, and ultimately a client walked in and kind of tossed the business card on my desk, and she said, "You need to talk to these people." And I'm like, "Well, who are these people?" Right? And it was an organization that did consulting and coaching for women entrepreneurs. And I was like, "Ooh, this is interesting," right? So I met with them, and they said, "Rhonda, we've got a corporate sponsorship, I guess you could say, and we're going to have 10 women go through this program, and we'd really like to invite you to come to it." And of course, I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, how much is it?" Right? Because I knew what was included, and they said, "No, it's actually been covered by a corporation." I'm like, "So you mean to tell me that I get to go through this entire intensive program for a summer, for 8 hours, one full day, and I get to meet with the owner of this organization, who's one of the most brilliant business people that I've ever met, for free?" Like,
Sign me up.
sign me. I literally felt like, okay, manna from heaven just fell into my lap. Like I didn't even know how to process that. Like it was such a gift to me because I loved learning, and I did feel kind of stuck. You know what I mean? Like, what's next? So I went through this program, and in the midst of that, we mapped out the vision. And I remember Steve saying, "Rhonda, if you really want to go down this direction, this is where I see you moving, right? Which is in the direction of working with people that are going through divorce. That's your passion. You've got the expertise to be able to help them, all of those things." And I thought, okay, yeah. And he goes, "But the caveat to that is I think if you really want to do it up big, you need to leave the financial industry." And I was like, "Oh, we're not hearing this."
Right. I've worked
No.
very hard to get to this point. I'm not leaving.
Like, no, this is not happening, right? But the more that I sat with it, the more that I wrestled with it, the more that I contemplated the direction that I wanted to go and where did I want my business to look 5 years from now, right? That question we always ask ourselves. It was clear that that was the direction I was going to go. And I'm not like advocating and saying everybody needs to leave the financial industry or the mortgage industry or the real estate industry. But for me, that was a good choice. And primarily because I was entrepreneurial enough to know that I could figure it out. And I didn't necessarily need to be part of a brokerage firm. And I was willing to say, yeah, I'm okay not investing people's money. I'm okay not doing insurance. I still can do the educational component around helping people make good decisions because I know enough to be able to help them with that, but I don't have to be the one implementing. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, that was part of that. And then along those lines, I had a friend who actually became widowed in her late 40s. And this was probably 10 years ago. And her kids were really young. I mean, 4 and 7. And kind of happened unexpectedly, very suddenly. And so as she was navigating through those pieces, in addition to that, meaning widowed, we had a bunch of friends that were going through divorce. And so she graciously offered to host a focus group at her house. And I've done multiple focus groups over the years to help people, to help dial in what do people need, what are they looking for, what are their frustrations, and how can I help them? So we did that. And I always say, 3 hours later, and who knows how much Kleenex.
Right.
I was driving home and I'm like, there's a better way to do this. I don't know exactly what it is at this point, but there has to be a better way. And I'm like, I really want to be able to help. So that seed had been planted. And then I went through this program over the summer of 2014 and put in my resignation in September of 2014. And leased an office and moved, and started my own company. And it's been good. I mean, 99% of the time.
But that 1%, let me tell you.
1% is painful. And I think I'm at the point now too. It's like, okay, well, what do the next 10 years look like? And I'll be honest, I don't necessarily have all of that figured out. I think I need to dream even a little bit bigger. I think that I've achieved not only what I had hoped when I started my business, but it's exceeded my expectations as far as being able to help people all over the world. Um, and so I don't know exactly what that next iteration looks like, but I will be spending some time here toward the end of the year as we're doing planning for, next year, trying to really dial in. And I've hired people to help me paint the vision of what's next for my company. We're getting ready to go through a branding refresh that will be happening within the next month. And that's going to also, I think, set the tone for moving forward. But, at the end of the day, right, the one thing that I do know is that we're going to continue to advocate for women. That much
Absolutely.
I know.
Well,
So what
that's a
it
good,
looks like, we're still, dialing that in, but that much I know.
it's a good baseline for success. Now, are there things that are really behind this motivation to continue to build? Is it family? Is it your clients, your own personal goals?
Great question. So this was probably at least 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. I had gone through a series of um, awareness exercises, right? And the ones that I've done, a lot of people have probably done too, like, the Myers-Briggs and the Gallup strength, Gallup Pole Strength Finder, the Enneagram. I've taken a lot of those assessments because a lot of times people would say, Rhonda, how is it that you're passionate about working with women that are going through divorce if you've never gone through divorce? And so you go through this whole soul searching of like, what is it about helping, people that are in this spot? And I spent a long time, right? Not only diving into that question, but Rhonda, do you work with men? Right? Like there was like the questions like, have you been through divorce and do you work with men? No, and really typically no. So okay, next questions. You know what I mean? And my answer to that was, listen, I just, I know my lane. I know that I'm passionate about helping women. I know that I want to be able to make an impact. And I'm one person, right? I can't help every single person. So I got to pick a lane and I'm going to stick in that lane and I'm going to be really good in that lane. And then surround myself with people that help the men or, work in these different areas like mortgage or real estate or whatever, right? I mean, we need each other to be able to come alongside and create this tribe for the people that are going through divorce. But ultimately, the key thing there was I went through an exercise that basically said two things. One is the Gallup Pole Strength Finder. One of my strengths is significance, meaning I want to be significant. I want to make the work that I'm doing have an impact. And this platform allows me to be able to do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I had gone through an exercise. What do you love? What do you wish you were doing more of? And oh, by the way, what do you hate? Right? And nobody wants to say, oh, well, we're in this culture now where like, let's all sing kumbaya and love each other and, whatever. Okay. Yes. And we need to have the dichotomy of hate or we don't understand what love is. You know what I mean? Like there has to be this yin and yang with that. But for me, the what do you hate really meant, what do you want to change? What fuels you? What ticks you off that makes you want to get up in the morning and change the paradigm, right? And so I went through that exercise. And what I found was when I answered that question, what do I hate? I hate abuse. I hate injustice, right? And so at the end of the day, Jason, those are the things that fuel me. And when working in the divorce space, there's plenty of injustice and there's plenty, right, of hate that's going on. Not only within the parties, but I would argue within the court system. And so I have the opportunity to advocate, to ask the right questions, to challenge the status quo, to bring in the right people that can move the needle. And it's working. And when I look back over the last 10 years, the impact we've been able to have, I've personally helped over 800 women. I've been able to move about 25 million into the hands of women that otherwise would have been left on the table. Simply because, again, if we don't know what questions to be asking or where to look, nobody's going to tell us those things. And it doesn't mean taking the men to the cleaners. None of the men have been homeless. That's not what we're talking about, right? It's a matter of really working hard to level the playing field so that women aren't only relying on government assistance because they aren't getting any support. And don't even get me started about that. Like, I don't think it's the government's job to take care of women who have been married to spouses who can provide for their family. And that's a bold statement, but I wholeheartedly believe that.
And you've got plenty of case studies to support that feeling. And I think you really touched on the word there of advocating. I mean, it's not like we're just trying to cause chaos in people's lives. People are coming to us with chaos in their lives, and a lot of them have no idea about finance, about mortgage, about real estate, about tax code. And they're also going through an emotionally traumatic process in their life. A lot of their friends are turning their back on them. People are picking sides. They may have to move. They may have support payments that may or may not be coming in. Again, that legal side is, I mean, it's very complex for someone who's not an attorney by trade. These folks need people to advocate for them, to sit down and say, okay, let's just have a conversation. Let's figure out what your goals are, what your logistics are. Are there solutions for you, or are you, in a situation where you're kind of on your own here, and you don't have to be on your own?
Yeah.
Now, for the benefit of those who don't know what a CDFA is, I know we're back to basics here for a hot minute here, but how would you describe that to somebody who says, okay, what does that stand for? What does it mean? Why would I need you? Or how would I know when I need to engage your services?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So CDFA stands for Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, and we have a lot of different roles depending on what it is that specific situation needs. So at the end of the day, right, the way that I manage my business is simply being somebody who can help them navigate through that process, helping them identify what are the issues, and then closing the gap, on those issues. So I'm doing the biggest thing that I would say that I bring to the table is the strategy around what are we doing next? What's important to you? And what do we need to do that? And part of that is my B.R.I.G.E method, which is taking them literally step by step through the divorce process.
Now, B.R.I.G.E is an acronym, if I recall. Would you mind going a little bit deeper into what that stands for?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the B.R.I.G.E method is basically we start with B, breathe and build your team, right? We just have to say, okay, I know there's swirling happening. We need to stop the swirling. We just need to take a breath, and we need to build our team. Who are the people on our team? And the way that I approach this is to say, listen, you need a foundational team, which is legal, financial, emotional as a baseline. Okay. And so I help people build the team. Sometimes they don't even know that they need a team, right? So I can help with that. In addition to that, we do the R, which is review the financials, gathering and organizing the documents, helping them with budgeting. And then I, which is identify the gaps. Where are the gaps in information? Gaps in transparency, gaps in income, gaps in confidence, and gaps in expertise. Do we need to bring in a mortgage broker or a real estate agent or a forensic accountant or a business valuation expert? Who else do we need that's part of that team? And then we've got the D, dial in the data, which is property division and support. So I'm helping with that. Guide to finish strong. So how are we finishing this process strong? And then E, which is exhale. Oh, now it's over. Now what?
Don't forget E. Whatever you do not forget E. That's awesome. So going back earlier in the B.R.I.G.E part, or the B.R.I.G.E method is, how are you identifying the appropriate professional partners to help your clients out when you start seeing gaps or needs or voids? What are you looking for in a professional to fill that gap?
Yes. So at the end of the day, I love acronyms. So the acronym that I use is the CIA method, right? Not CYA, although there's probably some aspect to that, but CIA, which is communication. One of the biggest things that we hear from clients that are coming to us that have already started the process is an overall frustration with the lack of communication from the experts that they're working with, whether that's the attorneys or whomever else. So that's the one thing. How is their communication? Is it respectful? Is it timely? Is it helpful? Right? Or are you, like I had a client whose attorney was like sending emails in all caps. I'm like, why is she yelling at us? I don't exactly understand. It was a little tongue in cheek, but I mean, the point was like, you know, there's other ways to do that. But the communication, and then we've got integrity, and then we have advocacy. So it's communication, integrity, advocacy. Those are the things that I'm looking for as a baseline, right? In addition to, I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, credentials are great. And yes, there's an area of expertise that we need to have. But if somebody's got a boatload of credentials and they're not showing up for their clients and they can't communicate and they lack integrity, don't care. I don't care. I mean, at the end of the day, right? That's the key. So I want to make sure that I'm surrounding myself with people that can help enhance the client experience, and I can do the same in the result, right? Like there's nothing that makes me more happy than getting an email from a client that says, Rhonda, thank you so much for introducing me to this person. My experience has been great. We just did a focus group with our existing clients. And one of the things that they said was, I didn't even realize I needed a team. And all of a sudden I looked up and I built a team. And it was all because of Rhonda's help. Like I just make these like organic introductions, like, okay, here's what I think we need to do next. Right. And here's who I think we should talk to. And all of a sudden they look up and yeah, they're like, I have a whole team of people around me. Like, and again, in alignment with what we said with Kristen Armstrong's, like, I've got the strongest, finest, most positive people I can find around me, and I didn't even have to find them because Rhonda found them, right? Like, how awesome is that, right? I love that. So that's really the framework. And, and again, sometimes you don't know. I think a lot of times for people that are going through divorce, they hire the attorneys based on a recommendation, which again, referrals are great. Introductions are great. But you also want to have somebody who's making an introduction that has seen the behind the curtain. They've seen the emails. They've seen the tone. If I call and I'm looking for an attorney in a particular area, and I reach out and I call their office and the front office staff is rude, nope. Or we call and we leave a message, hey, we're doing some, background stuff. We're trying to find an attorney in your area for one of our clients, and they don't call us back. Nope. I'm not calling 10 times because I want to try to make an introduction to a potential client if they're not willing to call me back. Because if they're not willing to call me back, a source of a potential referral, what makes me think they're going to actually call their clients back? They're not.
So true.
Right? So, and I think at the end of the day, right, we have an opportunity to also, as professionals, hold each other accountable. Because at the end of the day, when we have the right people that are, client centric, we can work together and it's fun. Like you want a team of people that are like, I get up in the morning and we're linking arms, Jason, and we're ready to help our clients. Like I want people like that on my team, don't you?
100%.
Right? Not like, I mean, I remember one of my clients one time saying, Rhonda, I was on Zoom with you. And then I was on Zoom with my attorney. And my attorney is also a very attractive person. She said, but she looks so tired and so haggard that I started to think, does she have the energy for my case? And I sure hope I'm not the one who's creating extra gray hair for her, or whatever. Like, I think there's something to that. Right? And so we need to just make sure that as professionals, we're showing up in the absolute best way possible for the people that really need us most.
Absolutely. I had a mentor, decades ago, I hate to say that, but he had said to me when he found out I went from the banking world to mortgage lending, again, this is 25 years ago, I hate to say it, alpha male kind of guy. He says, he called me Gordon, you'll know you've arrived as a good lender when you fire your first realtor. And I remember thinking, okay, I came out of nowhere and I'm thinking, okay, my sales manager says realtors are our lifeblood. And why would I fire a realtor? And of course, he looks at me and says, you haven't arrived yet, clearly. Give me a call when you do. And he was a real estate agent, by the way. And
Hmm.
I felt like I was, Luke Skywalker and this is Yoda. And I was, was getting some kind of coded message. Took me, I'd say, a better part of a year. And I called him one day. I said, were you referring to the fact that I bring a lot to the table and that I shouldn't settle? And he said, it took you a year to figure this out.
Mm,
We worked together in the banking world beforehand. He says, you've got to understand the value you bring, and it's not something you're going to negotiate. Find the people that bring the same value with the
mm,
same heart behind what they're doing for a living. And, you know, I'll close that story out, but just it was such a baseline for me decades later where I get into the divorce world and I think, gosh, I want to be around people who are doing it for the right reasons, who truly care about their clients, and who are resourceful enough to figure out that there's more than just their one focus. Again, if we're focusing on finance, but there's a child custody issue or there's, heaven forbid, domestic violence going on, the finances might not be the biggest priority in that moment. Like, ask the right questions, have the right resources in play. And
mm.
um, yeah, it's funny you mentioned the attorney who wrote in all caps. I had this attorney, and we're still friendly. And I've given him a hard time about this since. But this guy, if you look at him, he looks like a mixed martial arts like cage fighter. This guy. You saw this guy in a dark alley, you'd cross the street and just say a prayer or two. But he pulled me into a case, and I don't know font sizes, but the font size was no less than 24. I mean, everything he wrote on these emails to opposing counsel, which he would see me on. And I'm reading these things and I'm almost jumping back from my computer when I see the size of this font, and it was highly intimidating. And I remember, I've got to know the guy enough now where I was able to give him a hard time and say, okay, what are you doing with that font? And he told me he'd been doing that for years and no one had ever told him his font was big. And I'm thinking, okay, how are you not seeing your font? He says, it looks normal on my end. I'm thinking, okay, you many people you have scared away. I mean, like I mean, I'm not some tiny person. I was terrified of this guy's emails. Okay, you are going to come through the computer and grab my neck. But anyway, yeah, it's funny. But yeah, these things are noticeable. They matter. And um, I love how you mentioned, just that receptionist at the attorney's desk and what what that first impression is. It took me 7 months to hire my loan coordinator, who I just refer to as my partner, Laura. And I describe her as an exceptional human who just happens to be really good at mortgages, and
Mm,
she does everything administrative, everything tech on my team. And we have a nice complement, but everything about our initial conversations, why it took so long to hire that position was exactly that. You are an extension of me. I work very hard
that's right.
to be reputation based, and I want to hire a good human who I don't have to teach empathy or ethics or just compassion. You should already know that. If I have to teach you mortgage lending, that's a different story. And you can
Yeah,
learn that. After, several decades on this planet, I shouldn't have to teach you how to be a good human being. And that's a real, it's a real difference there to
yeah,
have that in place. So speaking of
yeah,
attorneys, because there's always attorneys listening to these podcasts here, and
yeah.
because we love you and just like
Yeah.
everyone else. But what kind of advice would you want to give to an attorney, just based on some of your own perspectives on what you see?
Ooh, yay. This is great. I will take this platform. No, it's interesting because again, like I have found some really great attorneys to work with, right? So let's focus on, okay, what is it about these attorneys that I would say, yes, this is what, makes them great to work with. One is that they are open to working together as a team. Um, they are open to new perspectives. They are, kind of in alignment, right, with the CIA method. They're communicative, they have integrity, they're willing to advocate for their clients. I mean, I think those are the big things. And at the end of the day, it might almost sound so simple, but I mean, I'm working with two really fantastic attorneys. One's out of New York and one's out of Florida at this particular juncture that come to mind when I think about this. Because I've worked in, those states with other attorneys. But these two just stand out. Why? Because they also value my input as an expert. And I have said to them, hey, listen, I appreciate the way that you have done this, and I respect that. But can I ask you a couple questions? And they're like, yeah, sure. Hey, could we do it this way? And here's why. Or could we look at it this way? And here's why. Or can you share with us a little bit about your strategy? Because I know you've got a strategy going on in your head, but the client is feeling anxious because they don't know what's going on. And it would help me better serve my client and ultimately, right, be able to help if I know what the strategy is. And that's where we've had the most success. And both of those attorneys were open to my input. And I do it in a respectful way, right? But at the end of the day, I think that's key. And I think sometimes there's some concern like, oh, well, if I bring more people to the table, then, we're going to have to share revenue, like not necessarily share revenue, right? But there's only so much money to go around. And, I don't want them bringing in other professionals that are going to receive payment too. But I would challenge the thought behind that, because I think at the end of the day, right, if the attorneys really want to focus on what they're good at and what their area of expertise is, that's the legal. So if you have people that can help with the momentum, with the pace of the case, to help women better understand what the decisions that they want to make and the clarity around that, things are going to go a lot more smoothly, which ultimately at the end of the day means either A, they're going to free up more time for themselves to actually do self-care, or they're going to free up more time to take on more cases. So either way, in my mind, it's a win, right? I mean, you can serve more people if we can get them in, serve them well, give them clarity, get this done, and move on. And then start the process over with somebody else. I mean,
Right.
there's so much lag time that happens in between. Like, we're waiting on 3 weeks for a response email. Like, can we pick up the phone? Can we get an answer faster so that, we can just keep things moving along? So those would be some of my thoughts.
One of my mentors, and this person too, is part of the training for is a divorce. I'll just go ahead and say it. Laurel Starks, who I just hold in such high regard.
Yes,
Her
we
and
love
Jody
Laurel.
Bruns are just my
We
my
love
peep.
them. We love
I
those two ladies.
absolutely, yes. In fact, I'll just say it right now. Laurel Starks, Jody Bruns, we love you.
Yes,
Yep,
we love you.
absolutely. So I've gone through, as you know, all the credentials. I mean, I just did a huge deep dive. CDLP, CDRE, CDS, RCS-D, and obviously the differences in book smarts and street smarts you get, in different curriculums. Some are definitely, my favorites. I'm going to keep it nice and diplomatic here and just say that I just saluted the two that are my favorites in their curriculums. Just the best of the best. A different one of those curriculums, I'm not going to go into. I came out of that and I was trained to believe that attorneys, first of all, were all alike. You can drop certain sound bites and they would just, chase you down the street to give you business, and couldn't be any different. I wasn't aware that the differences between mediation, collaborative, litigation, I mean, these are completely different vibes. And I remember sitting down with a local litigation partner of his firm. He had over 20, now at this point, he's got over 30 attorneys underneath him that are all doing litigation, divorce litigation. And I got introduction to the partner, and I took him out to lunch, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I just hit the gold mine here. And I'm trying to impress upon him, because of a previous training I had been to, that my loan file is everything he needs. In other words, first of all, I would need to get clients written authorization to provide this, but what if I was able to give you and your paralegal team my loan file? I've got pay stubs, W-2s, tax returns. I have a time-stamped or date-stamped credit report, appraisal, the title report, if there's an LLC or a family trust or bankruptcy discharge paper. I've got it all. I mean, look how much time I could save you. And he looks at me as if I'm just the stupidest person on the planet. He says, Jason, I bill out at $400 an hour. I pay my paralegal $60 an hour. That client can take their own sweet time getting me their documentation as he's turning his Rolex into the sun and I'm being blinded by his diamond bezel and I'm going, got it. I wasn't given the right training, but to bring it full circle here, I realize that there's certain folks that I would resonate a whole lot more with, and it's not the ones that are just looking at the billable
No.
hours. It's the ones that are truly looking at helping their clients. And
Yeah.
I work with all of them, but I tend to resonate more with mediation and collaborative, especially if we've got a situation where, the in-spouse and out-spouse are they're getting divorced, but there's kids involved and they don't want to just hate each other. And maybe the outspouse, maybe it's him, keep it gender neutral, but maybe it's him and she's staying in the home. And he says, look, the kids are devastated that we're getting divorced. Let's keep the marital home intact. Let's sit down with someone like Jason, figure out how you can buy me out, remove me from the existing joint lien on the property, give me my divvy of equity. I might be able to help you qualify for that loan with some of the support payments I'm giving you. Hey, Jason, could you weigh in and let us know how much I need to give? Because we have a certain flexibility in making this work. And in
Mm-hmm.
the end, you know, it'll be equal. She'll get what she's going to get over a certain amount of time, regardless. But it'd be nice if we structure that in a way that's going to allow certain goals, keeping the home, letting the
Mm-hmm.
kids stay
Mm-hmm.
in the school districts and those kind of things. And you just don't get that when you've got this kind of war of the roses mentality where
Yeah.
like I'll show you. And well, good. I appreciate that insight. And without opening up a Pandora's box here, I'm dying to curiosity. That same question of your insights here. What insights would you give to a divorce mortgage specialist on what they should or should not be doing?
Oh my gosh, we were so on the same page because that's where my mind actually went as you were talking. I was like, "Ooh, I got some thoughts." So I would say, from my perspective, right, when I started my business 10 years ago, I always operated from a position of holistic, always, right? Hey, who else could we be bringing in? Because my role is looking at the whole entire financial picture. So, what CDLPs are offering is valuable for me and the client, right? But for me, because I'm looking at the whole thing, like, okay, once we have the information on the buyout or the refinance or the whatever, right? Depending on what's happening with the mortgage, I then can structure and help my clients understand what are their options. And, to bring it full circle, when I'm working with mortgage professionals, and I have helped my clients gather and organize all of the documents as part of the divorce process, right? Um, I do that because I want them to understand as they're touching the documents or they're scanning the things. It gives me micro moments of education to help them. Okay, do you know what this means? Let me just take a moment, if I may, and share with you this, right? So they're not always feeling like they're drinking out of a fire hose. The second piece of it, though, is I've done the homework with them on their budget. I have been working with them and the attorney, right, to go back and say, okay, here's the income. Let's go back and ask some questions about support because the calculations for support are only going to be as good as the numbers we're putting into the calculator. So what's our range, right? And then you come in and you say, hey, listen, how do we back into that? Here's their goal. Here's how I want to be able to help them. Here's what we're looking at support. Here's what they have potentially coming in from income for their job. Let's back into that number. And then I take that information and synthesize it with my client as part of the whole picture. So I have found that for CDLPs, that most of them are working siloed by themselves or only with the attorney. And again, there's a gap. The gap is who's doing the strategy on the financial side of thinking through how all the pieces work together. Me, right? So I like to be able to do it as a team. I do my meetings with the CDLPs as a joint meeting, and I head up the meeting. Like, hey, here's the scenario, here's the situation, here's what we're thinking. Okay, Jason, what do you think? Can you crunch some numbers for us? Can you look at this scenario and this one and maybe some others that I'm not thinking of? Like, again, I've been in the financial industry for over 20 years, right? So I've had enough, I'm not a mortgage expert, but I have enough to know how it fits into the picture
Mm-hmm.
that is very valuable, particularly for the person who hasn't been involved in the finances, right? Um, I can help empower that person to take the information or the report that you've provided for them and say, okay, what does this mean for you in the whole grand scheme of your settlement? And then we're talking about the negotiating and all of that. But that as part of my bridge method, right? That identify the gaps is certainly where you come in, right? And you're providing a ton of value that then allows me to be able to say, okay, and how do we take that and dial in the data? How does this impact property division? And how does this impact support? And so that's where I see that coming in. So I would say, hey, listen, CDLPs are super valuable. I will not work with anybody who's not a CDLP because I think the mortgage piece is so important, as is the financials. You don't want to be working with generalists. I mean, there's some organizations that will bring on experts, mortgage, financial, whatever, that are supposed to be working in the divorce space that don't have the experience to be working in the divorce space. And I will not partner with those people because it's so important that we are all on the same page.
It's so true. It's so true. And I got to tell you, I mean, as a mortgage professional, outside of the CDLP training, there really hasn't been any divorce training for mortgage professionals. And if you think about it, if you are just passively receiving the occasional divorce client, and of course, we all know divorce has many different stages to it. And of course, we already discussed different sort of vibes behind whether it's amicable or not so amicable. There are so many different nuances in the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD approval guidelines specific to divorce, whether it matters who's on title or who is reemerging back into the workforce, or there's joint debts or different types of structures and different loan amounts and whatever have you. It ends up getting to a point where if you don't have that training, it really is blind leading the blind. And with all respect to those mortgage professionals who are not trained, who are trying to really make it happen in that situation, it's still an uphill battle. And so having that advanced training, that ongoing training, and being able to proactively receive these clients, it's a different level of care, and it really does matter. It's a huge difference.
Well, and I know that, like, the Certified Divorce Lending Professional Organization offers CE for CDFAs. And so I took advantage of that to knock out some CE. And I'm going through the stuff. I'm like, I have zero desire to be in the weeds with this stuff. Like, I want to be I want to be kind of coordinating the pieces and seeing how it fits into the whole picture. But like, I left that 3-hour training. I was like, okay, this is why I partner with CDLPs. I have zero interest in this. Like, it was painful, but important. You know what I mean? Like, the level of detail hurt my head.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was just 3 hours. I mean, that was just the 3-hour training, and the constant learning and the changes and the updates it's just a lot. And so, again, I have said from the very beginning, as people are going through divorce, I mean, you need experts. The generalists are just not going to cut it. And I have so many stories of people that have gone with the generalist in whatever area that is, and it's come back to bite them. And
really
it's
does.
costly. I mean, it can be big, big challenges and big costly experiences. And the one that stands out to me the most, Jason, this was a couple years ago, and it was probably one of the first times that I felt like there was tension between me and my client because we didn't agree. And we didn't agree because she wanted to hire a mortgage professional that did not have experience with divorce. And he was agreeing to give her a jumbo loan, which, from my analysis of her budget and support, was too much.
Right.
And her monthly payment was going to be too much. And even though I advocated for great monthly support outcome based on the data, it still was a lot. So, long story short, this gentleman did not know how to read a marital settlement agreement, did not understand the nuances of the divorce process, and literally in the 11th hour said, we can't do the deal. Like, the painful. Day before the closing.
Oh my goodness. That's
it was not
when
okay.
You find out. Yeah, it's not okay.
And of course, you don't want to say I told you so, but I'm like, okay, This is why I have these conversations, and this is why I have strong opinions about this stuff, because I've seen them go sideways. And so I called a mortgage broker that I had suggested in the beginning and said, hey, listen, here's what happened. She said, no problem. You send me the file. We're not going to be able to obviously close tomorrow. I'll have my team on it first thing in the morning. And they were able to close 2 weeks later. But she could have, she could have had nowhere to go with her kids, her 4 kids, because their marital home had been sold. B, the people that she was buying the house from were total pains in the butt. And they could have said, no, we're done. We're out, right? Like, we're going to find another buyer.
Right.
So she could have lost her dream home, which was a little hobby farm, which she's. So it all worked out. But I'm telling you, like, had I not been part of that conversation, she would have probably lost that deal. And it should have never happened in the first place.
Absolutely. With any borrower out there, whether divorce is present, no matter what the scenario is, it's so important to get that pre-approval in place to shake out any of these loose ends up front. Um, I'll tell anybody that will listen to me that there's 3 different types of logic, and they all begin with L. There's life logic, which is kind of, two folks saying, well, in the court of public opinion, this should be the way it is. Yeah, I agree. That's how it should be. Yeah, yeah. That's life logic. There's lawyer logic, which is, hey, we worked out this deal in our break room and, our conference room, and you guys better honor it. We decided you're going to lend to our client, so you're going to lend to our client. And like, okay, you don't have jurisdiction to force us to lend or to breach an existing contract. And you don't get to do that. And then the third logic is lender logic. And I'm not trying to pick a fight with the world here, but guess who wins when it comes to approving a mortgage?
Yep.
So being on that front line and having to balance that and let the attorneys know that what might be a viable legal solution may not equate to an available lending option. And maybe we embrace that and we are proactive. But
Yeah.
well, something tells me if left to our own devices, we can chat for another couple hours. But I
I
really, really
know.
want to respect your time. And I mean, I'd love to continue the conversation. I just feel like, oh my gosh, we're at the hour mark here, and
I
Rhonda's
know.
probably looking at her clock, going, "Okay, Jason, I have places to be right now and people to chat with." But in closing, I imagine folks listening to this would love to engage with you, hire you, or learn about your services or how they
Yep.
can benefit. What are the best ways they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website, www.cdivorce.com, and then Instagram at my name, at Rhonda Noordyk, Noordyk. 2 of the best places to reach me.
And Rhonda is
It
Rhonda.
is.
You're spelling your last name, but I think some people might leave out that H, so well, fantastic. Well, any parting words you want to share with me or the world, and any pearls of wisdom you want to close with?
Yeah, I would just say, you know what? No matter where you're at in this situation, right? You are smart and you're able to navigate through these pieces. But it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to, again, surround yourself with the strongest, finest, most positive people that you can find, because you deserve it.
Hard to find fault in that logic. I'll tell you. Well, I got to tell you, I mean, just human to human, you're a wonderful person. I would love to cultivate, a friendship and
Yeah,
business
thank you.
relationship as time goes on. But in the meantime, I just want to say a sincere thanks for being on the
Yeah,
call here. And
thank you.
yeah, I think we're all the better for listening to you chat for the last hour here. So,
Oh, no,
Rhonda,
thank you.
well, hey, I appreciate you taking time, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All righty, you got it.